Hi guys, and thanks for joining in on this time's episode of Design and a Half. I couldn't help myself but try and do a different type of intro just because I'm trying to introduce a little bit of fun into this whole thing so that it does not become all too boring for you guys. That being said, getting back to the topic at hand, which is ethics in design and social media, I think this is one of those types of topics that is sort of overlooked by most of the people just because in nowadays it's sort of granted that there are no ethics within social media, within design, we're just a bunch of mercenaries that are trying to do our jobs and just try to finish projects as best as we can. I don't think this is actually true. I think both social media as well as design both have a really important role to play within our society, and I think we should be very, very careful about how we perceive it, how we go about our day-to-day lives, especially if we're thinking within the confines of these two realms, which are design and social media, because both of them have the potential to influence our lives in a very, very significant way, which means, as I said earlier, to be extra careful about how we proceed with influencing people, telling them what to do, and so on. Case in point being the social media, for starters, just because social media has become such a huge vehicle for selling and buying credibility more than anything else. It's not necessarily all about selling products nowadays as much as it's trying to build up credibility for a specific audience and then just using that credibility to sell specific services, goods, what name you. I think in a way companies have found out that the social media is a good enough voice to reach out directly to the customer instead of having to go through the normal channels, which are TV, newspaper, and printed ads, just because those types of communications are far more expensive than this one, which is communicating with people that interact with a specific audience on a daily basis, especially if we're thinking about influencers right now. And that being said, I think influencers in themselves have become sort of a necessary evil for those companies. But at the same time, some of those influencers have sort of lowered their ethical and more moral levels to a degree to which they would accept being sort of trading in their credibility and trying to sell people things that they don't necessarily need and things they don't necessarily believe in just to be able to get by. And because of that, it sort of snowballed into this objective for a lot of people to become influencers, because they believe that influencing has sort of this huge appeal to not do anything and just gain a lot of money just by following people and presenting them with all sorts of products, of traveling around and so on and so forth. I think we have to establish where there's an ethical barrier that says we need to stop or certain influencers need to stop peddling faulty wares or things that aren't necessarily good and things that they don't necessarily believe in, and start just filtering them out to the bottom, to where those products themselves are disappearing outside of the market completely. Another tactic that is commonly used by a lot of people nowadays on social media, and when I say social media, I'm not necessarily only referring to the normal channels like Instagram, LinkedIn, and I don't know, other Facebook, for example. No, not necessarily only those, but lately media outlets like Medium have become a way to popularize all sorts of opinions, and I think it's worthy to say that Medium as a platform to write and debate and read specialty articles has become a social media platform in itself, to be honest. It's no longer just a way to share knowledge. It's no longer just a way to write papers, if you will, or share thoughts with other people. It's also become a way to create publicity for yourself. It's also become a way to make yourself sellable as a product, if you want to. And I think it's no longer at this point just a way to share knowledge. It's also a way to sell things. And this is absolutely obvious, especially if we're thinking about how many people use Medium to sort of create articles that are rather polarizing, that are trying to shift people's attention towards either one spectrum or the other one of the discussion. And what I mean by that is the fact that they are trying to make people sort of divide each other into two factions, the pros and the cons, or the people who are sort of against and the people who are for the idea being sold. And usually what happens is that these types of ideas are usually controversial. They're very they're the type of ideas that, I know, try to put a spin on everything or try to put things on their heads in order to make people attentive to it. For example, you've probably read a lot of titles like UX is dead, what about UX, what's going on in UX lately, anti-trends in UX, and those sorts of titles that are usually very catchy just because they sort of use a common term that is very popular right now and try to put it on its head and try to put a negative spin on it, if that term is usually seen in a positive context. So what happens is that people that are trying to sell something specific, for example, if I'm trying to sell a book, and this is an actual example, I'm not going to give any names, I'm not going to give any links or anything like that, but I'm just going to give you a rough example of what I've seen lately. There is an article, or actually there's a series of articles out there written by someone who is saying that basically UX is sort of a waste of time. I'm pretty sure you're gonna find out about who it is, especially if you're in the industry and you know what I'm talking about. But anyways, I digress. That person says that UX is just a waste of time because there's just a bunch of people talking nonsense and nobody actually doing anything. And the weird thing is that if you look at the whole article, everything he says is sort of easily debunked with actual examples and real world sort of proofs that what he says is actually not true. And there's plenty of people who've said it that it's not true and brought up arguments and so on. But the whole thing was that was not the point of the article. The point of the article was to make a lot of noise around a very popular term, to bring people attention towards that specific article, where at the bottom it says, read or buy my new book about this and that topic. Again, I'm not going to mention what the book is about because I'm pretty sure you will find out. If you already read the article, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, then that's fine, you will never know, but I'm not going to do that because I don't think it's fair, and second of all, I just want to presume the person maybe had a good intention and I'm just misjudging them, even though I'm really certain they didn't. But whatever, moving on. This sort of approach that you write something which is really, really contentious and polarizing is going to attract a lot of people's attention, both the people who are defending the idea as well as the people who are contending the idea. And this is going to happen on all types of social platforms, whether you're talking about this on LinkedIn, whether you're talking about this on Facebook, whatever it is. It could even be a newspaper article. If the person slips a couple of links, a couple of words, a couple of informations in the whole article, in the whole thing, that are just happening to mention whatever it is that he's trying to sell you, whatever it is that he's trying to tell you, you can be pretty damn sure that that article was written with a specific scope in mind and with a specific goal in mind. Sorry, not scope. To determine you to see something or to sell something to you, and that is something that I don't really can get behind, because I think that the whole purpose of actually writing and educating writing articles to educate other people is to provide value. When you're doing articles like that, and when you're trying to create polarizing thoughts within an industry, I don't think that you yourself represent, by the way, I don't think you're actually doing yourself a favor, because you're decreasing your credibility in terms of your presence in that particular industry, as well as your understanding of that specific industry as well. Especially if you're talking to an audience which is mainly formed of individuals that are within the industry, or people who are trying to get inside the industry. Obviously there's always shades of gray to this, and sometimes people don't necessarily do this just because they want to peddle something, but most of the times it is. And that's the one thing that I really hate about, and I think has to change in the future, just because there needs to be some sort of ethical way to actually sell your product. It's fine if you engage with other people's content, it's fine if you like it, if you talk about it, if you're trying to be positive about it. Don't be an asshole about other people's works, about other people's things. Just don't try to tear other people's down just to show how great you are. That sucks, and that shows that you're such a bad type of person, and that you really don't understand the social media game at all, because everything that you do in social media comes back to you. If you're being an asshole, people are going to attract that sort of behavior is going to attract by itself negative thoughts towards you as well, and negative actions from other people. Some within the industry, some outside of the industry, it doesn't really matter, but that sort of thing is not okay. Especially if you're thinking within the confines of the fact that we as people need to belong in this sort of guild that we're part of. Like designers are in a part of a guild of its own that is formed out of fellow designers or people who are interested in design or try to become designers themselves. And that means that we have to be a little bit hygienic about how we go about our business with ourselves, and try to keep the hate to a minimum, but at the same time speak out when we see bullshit. Like whenever you see stuff that is totally unethical, it's my personal opinion that we should talk about it. We should speak up about it. We should say this is not ethical. This type of behavior is not acceptable within the design community. It needs to be shunned. The person doesn't need to be cancelled, not by far. That person needs to be taught that certain behaviors are not acceptable and will not be tolerated. Maybe they need to be educated to provide value and sell at the same time, because that's also possible. In a way, it's exactly what I'm trying to do, even though I'm not necessarily selling anything, because I don't ask for money from people on my podcast. I don't ask for people's money to buy stuff from me. I don't even ask for donations right now, and I don't think I'm probably going to for a good part of the time, just because this podcast came about just because I was really interested to provide value to other people, to educate them, and to provide positivity within the design community itself, not tear it down. I just want to share some of the knowledge I've gained throughout the years with other people who might be interested in it, which is why I think that the approach of some people that some people have towards this pattern of when someone comes and wants to share with others, they usually get shut down. And I think it's such a shitty way to do it. Like, why do we need to do this to people who are creating things instead of encouraging them to create more stuff? This is something I've never understood actually, and it's probably more prevalent in my own country in Romania as it is in others, because I've seen so many designers being shut down in all sorts of communities for absolutely anything that they do. If they might be just starting out, people just come knock them on their heads and just like, no, this is not okay. Like, guys, let's understand that every person has a learning curve to everything that they do, especially in this, if they're new, especially if they're trying to educate others. Like, if you don't like their content, just don't watch it. It's that simple. You don't have to talk, you don't have to knock them down, you don't have to tear them up, you don't have to make them feel shitty about what they do. It's not okay. Like, we ourselves are creators. We are not people who demolish others people's dreams. But at the same time, we need to be mindful of how we speak to others. We have to be mindful with ourselves. We have to be mindful of how we try to build the design community we want to live in, because the community that we want to live in is always a reflection of our own behavior. So if you behave crappy, that's exactly what we're building. If we want to have a good community, a clean one, without people trying to tear other people down, then we shouldn't probably do this, or at least try to dial it down. If you guys feel like something is shitty, that's fine. That's something every one of us goes through on a daily basis when they see design they disagree with, and that's okay. But try to be respectful about it, or at least try to, I don't know, use sarcasm, because you always know that sarcasm is like the language that some people just don't understand. And if you want to show how superior you are, just go ahead and do that. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but at least don't be blunt about it, or just don't be an asshole about it, okay? That it's not okay, man. Like, come on. It's really not. And this ties into the next sort of punchline I wanted to, or actually dot I wanted to get to, which is the fact that a lot of people have this "I'm better than you" attitude within the design community, and I really don't get why. Humble pie is something that every designer should actually eat at least once in their lifetime. And you know why? Just because understanding that you're not the best designer out there, you will never be the best designer out there unless you sacrifice absolutely everything that you have and dedicate it to your job, which from my perspective is sort of stupid, but whatever. Everyone's up for debate, whatever. It's just my perspective. You're not going to be the best. If you're not going to be the best, why be an asshole, and why try to be superior with other people? You can just level with them and just consider them your equals, even if they are not, even if you know that the other person is absolutely worse than you. You don't have to act as a wise ass, you don't have to act superior, you just have to act as a normal friggin' human being towards them, and just talk to them in a normal way without sounding hoity-toity and superior. It's so toxic to have an attitude like this within the design community, just because, as I said earlier, we're creators. We should encourage our peers to create more, to tell them whether something they do is wrong or not, and if they accept criticism, that's fine. But I don't know, maybe I'm too old in this game, because I've been working in design ever since I think 2006, 2007, when I was still in the university, so quite a long time ago. But back then people were sort of so avid about learning new things, and they were not focused so much about showing who's best and who's worst. Sort of, I'm smarter than you. Ooh, look at you, you're stupid. It wasn't about that. It was about just absorbing knowledge, just about doing things that are really cool, just doing amazing stuff, not necessarily being in this continuous sort of competition with each other. Because one thing I've noticed ever since these last couple of years, I don't know, like 10 years or so, whenever the gaming industry rose up so powerfully among us, is that I've noticed that it influenced our behavior as people, as well as the communities that we're in. Just because games by their definition are extremely competitive, and they instill this competitive mindset into ourselves, it also transpires into our own behavior, and I noticed it in myself as well. Whenever I played for a very long time something that I'm not sure some of you might be familiar with it's called, the game's called Destiny. I've been very mindful about how it influenced me, just because I was noticing behavior changes. Like, I was always very angry, I was frustrated with myself, just because I was always getting my ass kicked in PvP and stuff like that. Now, there's two ways to approach this. Either one approach is I will get better no matter what, just because I'm focusing on that aspect of the game, or this is just a game, I lost, whatever, it's not a big deal. The problem is how others that you're in contact with in these games usually end up affecting you. And one type of interaction is, okay, whatever, just get better. You don't take it to heart, you don't let it affect you. The other one is people get under your skin and say stuff like, dude, you suck, and so on. You might think it's asinine, and you might think it's so childish to do those things, and you might even say, okay, you are childish for letting those things get to you. But when you're playing for a long time, just because you're trying to get really good, that stuff usually gets to you. And in comparison, I'll tell you a story with regards to this that you can compare to the design world, and not necessarily only the design world, but also your day-to-day job. Okay, let me explain exactly what I meant by that. So think about your job as a sort of game. When you're starting up, you have a level 0. You're just like the person that just started up. You have a bunch of resources, you start building your base and so on. You start developing your skills. The more you grow, the more you progress. But this is in a game. In a career, actually, it depends a lot on the circumstances of where you live, what company you're working in, and so on. Which means that basically, if we're to make a parallel between gaming and jobs, you would not level up in a career as fast as you would level up in a game, just because the game's sort of path is already defined before you start the game, whereas the career path is not necessarily so well defined, because it depends on a lot of aspects. And here is the problem. A lot of the people who are playing games for a long time usually end up overlapping those two and saying, well, hey, I've been playing this game for like 4 years, this job for example, but I've not gotten a promotion, even though I'm successfully doing this and that and this and that and so on and so forth, even though I have performance reviews which are always good and so on and so forth. But the problem is that we are always comparing those facts within our jobs with whatever happens in the gaming world, or in a situation that we've seen in a movie, because that's the problem. Like, we're always relating our careers with what we've been educated from movies to believe that's going to happen, and it's not necessarily true. For example, if you're working in a place that doesn't need people who are as skilled as you, just someone who is fairly less skilled, you do invest in yourself, which is an amazing thing, but you end up not using all of those skills and you end up frustrated for it. And that's what leads to this sort of superior attitude that creates this sort of professional frustration that ends up spilling over in all sorts of parts of your life, including the one where you interact with other people who are in the same industry. And that needs to change with your perspective about your job. If you don't manage to go ahead and just like be promoted, that's fine. Try to find other ways to that bring you satisfaction into your professional life. Try to educate others if you think you're ready for that. If not, try to just focus on learning. I think learning and absorbing as much as possible in terms of information is going to be much more beneficial to your career development than focusing on being the best possible designer that you can be. Obviously you can do that as well, but it's going to be very, very toxic for you on the long run. At least from my perspective, it's going to be much more toxic than having an outlook that is focused towards just absorbing knowledge instead of comparing yourself constantly to the best ones or to others in that fashion. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about dark patterns within products, and I'm just going to touch on this subject just a little bit, just because this in itself is a topic worthy of a podcast episode in itself. It's that huge and it's that big, and it deserves a lot of attention, just because it's very, very important, and it influences our lives in a lot of ways that we don't even perceive sometimes. So some of you might be familiar with the term dark patterns just because you're operating within the service industry or within maybe web design or product design or topics that are sort of related to user experience design or customer experience. And usually those are the areas where dark patterns are used the most. However, they are not only limited to services and digital products. There's also actual cases of them being used in physical products as well, but I'm not going to go into detail with regards to that. I'm just going to give you some examples so that you understand exactly what I'm talking about. So where there's certain airlines that whenever you buy a ticket and you go through the whole process of checking out and buying the actual ticket. In some situations or in some companies, you'll end up with some small additional fees that are sort of these travel insurances that are being slipped to you without you knowing, either because the checkbox is put in a position that not necessarily explains what's going on properly, or the text is way too small, or they sort of add it there, and in order for you to remove it, you have to uncheck the checkbox for the travel insurance to be removed from the product basket. There's also cases where certain game key delivery services use this dark pattern to also get some sort of subscription out of you. So they add this like $2 or $5 fee additionally to your purchase, sort of to subscribe you to a service that guarantees your keys delivery or some shady stuff like that. I really don't remember, but it's somewhere along those lines, because I've distinctly remember having gone through that problem myself when I bought some CD keys a couple of months ago. I think it was from All Key Shop, and All Key Shop handles this through a lot of third-party websites that sell those keys either by auction or by direct buy. And some of those websites have these sort of fees that are used for a subscription price, but they don't necessarily tell you exactly what you're getting from that subscription, and it's just being added with the purchase, exactly like I said earlier, with a small checkbox that is barely visible or noticeable, and you have to uncheck in order for you not to pay those extra dollars for your purchase. Additionally, another very popular pattern, and this is one which is actually widely accepted to my absolute bafflement in a lot of places, is the fact that whenever you're trying to buy a subscription service, and you have to choose between buying annually versus buying monthly, you're going to have to dish out more money when you're paying monthly than you'll end up doing when you pay yearly. To some extent, it sort of makes sense from a business perspective, because you're trying to make sure that you have a positive cash flow for the entire year, and that means you have to encourage people to actually subscribe for a longer amount of time instead of a shorter. However, the problem is that only focuses on the business end of things, not the consumer end of things, or the user's end of things. Because I myself would like to prioritize my money so that if something comes up and I don't necessarily need the service anymore because I'm just using it for 1 or 2 months, then I would like to benefit from the same type of price as a person who buys for a whole year. And I mean, why would you make this difference outside of your own business perspective on my own self as a customer? Because this is very, very aggressive in terms of politics or way of handling the subscription service, just because you're only seeing things from your end of the yard. Whereas if you would see it from the user's perspective, you might end up with more actual subscribers just because they see it as cheaper. It's all about perception. Whether, for example, you might also see certain services use something like having a checkbox that again ties you into buying for a whole year instead of just for 1 month. And what ends up happening is that you end up spending for 1 year without necessarily intending to, instead of spending for just 1 month to be evaluating the service. And this is another thing I'm going to touch upon, but at a later stage, about how people do evaluations and how digital products are not necessarily primed to be evaluated in this day and age, especially those which are subscription based. However, that in itself is a different topic which I'm going to engage with later. For now, let's just go with this further along, and I'm going to give you a different example of a really shady pattern in products, and that is in UX pin. And I'm really sorry to have to do this, because I'm usually not one for blaming and stuff like that, but in this particular case it was really annoying to see, because UX pin is a UX tool, first of all. Secondly, they are huge people that advocate for user experience in a lot of ways. They wrote a lot of books about UX, trying to promote UX in a lot of ways. And at the same time, seeing them use something like Roach Motel in their own subscription service seems to be a bit shady, to be honest. I mean, it's sort of like a really ironic way of saying, hey guys, we support the UX community, but if you want to be part of this and if you're using our tool, you will kind of be stuck in this thing just because we want to keep you prisoners in our tools as much as possible, instead of giving you the option to, cancel and use our tool as much as you need, but within your own budget and within your own requirements, not ours specifically. And this is sort of the same when you're talking about things that not necessarily only UXPin does, but other companies as well, when they're using sort of reverse psychology and guilt tripping people into either signing up on signing or actually giving up on a sign out process, or try to convince them not to unsubscribe from a service, not to unsubscribe from a live service, or whatever it is that they have that they're trying to get you hooked on. I mean, this is such a crummy thing to do, guys. Why do you have to use this whole guilt tripping into people by telling people stuff they might not want to hear, and by using that against them just so you can have one more goddamn subscriber on your list that you will probably not even miss that much, because that person probably didn't like your service or whatsoever. But why steep to such low degrees of manipulation to keep people hooked onto something they might not necessarily need? It's one of the most aggressive and most anti-user focused things that you could probably do for others to just to keep your thing afloat. And I don't think it's something that should be done in the future, just because I don't think it actually works. And this might sound ironic, but people just sniff these things out really fast. So whenever you're using stuff like, do you not like free food? Do you want to unsubscribe? Do you not want free tips for growing your business? It's not like you're giving me amazing tips, because that's why I'm unsubscribing, just because your information is sort of crappy, it's not useful, and I just want to keep my inbox nice and clean, because you're cluttering it with all sorts of junk, and I don't need that. So if you would actually provide value in those things, if you would provide value by giving people insight, by giving people information that they might actually need, not sort of regurgitated information out of the internet that just is repackaged in a different format, people might actually be subscribed to your newsletter further on. They might be interested in what you have to sell. They might click on your links. They might actually engage with your content if you would not use these sort of clickbaity and guilt-trippy ways of coercing people into consuming your information that is not necessarily useful in the first place. And last but not least, there's also the practice of buying and selling views, as well as pages per se and accounts. And this is actually something which few people might know about, but it's such a widespread practice, especially if we're talking about people who there's a business model in itself about this, and I'm going to actually try to cover it in a later podcast episode, just because this thing is starting to drag out, because there's a lot of things that are sort of here to say about ethics and design, especially in social media, but it's too short of a time frame to be able to capture it all in just one episode. So I think I'm going to just end off by saying, please stay tuned. I'm going to create more information and more episodes like this. I've definitely got a whole schedule mapped out until December, believe it or not. So there's a lot of information coming out, and I hope you'll be sticking around for when it's out and subscribing, perhaps even commenting. I would love for people to comment and give me more feedback on what I'm putting out. Especially, I would love to know if you like and enjoy whatever I'm putting out, if you think it's useful. I would hate to be able to not help you in any way and just provide fluff or garbage that nobody finds useful. So if you think that what I do is not useful to you, please drop me a line and please tell me what you would like to hear on the podcast in terms of information that would help you out, or your business perhaps, or your personal career development if you're a designer, or whatever it is that you would like to hear. I would be more than happy to tackle all of those things, and especially I would love to engage into debates with you guys, of those who are regular listeners and who like the information I'm presenting. Please don't feel like strangers and drop in comments and say anything that drops on your mind, and don't be afraid to engage with me, like, please. Also, I would really appreciate if you would rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts. If you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, don't be afraid to rate it exactly as you feel like it's worth. I don't need you to rate it 5 or 4 stars, or just do whatever you guys feel. I'm not begging for anything from you. Just do whatever you're comfortable with. But I hope you will still be here for the next episode. This is me signing out for the night, and talk to you next time. Bye bye, guys.